The Law of Ice magic is an extremely high damage law with many damaging spells for all tiers of units. You also have some great buffs to catapult unit stats for attack and defense, as well as debuffing enemies to make them easier to take out in melee and from a range. You also have some extremely expensive spells which can easily use all of your wins in one if you aren't too careful, so make sure you land in those casts to get all the value possible. And obviously Kislev are for now the only faction that can use this law. First up we of course have the passive of the law, Frost Shield. This targets enemy units map-wide and is triggered whenever your Ice caster casts a spell. Grants 15 armor and 12 missile block chance for 11 seconds. Of course it's passive, so there's not really a bad way to use it. The increased defense is pretty nice and means your armor is going to be a little bit tankier for 11 seconds every single time you cast a spell. When you combine this with some augment spells, you've got a recipe for some pretty strong buffs on your units. Moving on now to the actual castable spells. First up we have Ice Sheet. This is a hex spell, costs 4 winds of magic and has a 27-second cooldown. It targets enemies in a 55 meter area of effect and has a cast range of 200 meters. Enemies in the affected area have minus 25% speed and charge speed. This is of course best used against units like cav and monsters that are about to make contact with your lines, and when you take into account that large area of effect, you're going to be slowing a hell of a lot of units per cast. Not only will the reduction in charge speed reduce the damage and disruption they do, but the overall speed reduction will make cycle charging much more difficult as they struggle to run back out of combat, resulting in them taking much more damage than they bargained for. This is of course a great spell versus anything that's trying to run away like enemy lords and heroes, as it allows you to slow them down and surround them with your units, meaning they will have no means of escape and fall while they fight their way through your lines. Whatever you're casting it on, just make sure you pay attention to the casting time, as the last thing you want is to get the cast off and the enemy have already charged and pulled out by the time they are slowed. Finally, this spell has no overcast. Next up with the Ice Maidens Kiss. This is a breath spell, costs 6 winds of magic and has a 30-second cooldown. It can only be targeted on the ground and has a cast range of 100 meters. It causes damage in a short, wide, expanding tear shape. The damage is not at all armor piercing, but does cause frostbite, which slows affected units by 30% for 10 seconds. Of course, with the mediocre damage, this one wants to be used exclusively on units with very low armor stats, as otherwise the damage is going to be basically nothing. You want to target large clumps of enemy chaff to hit the most entities possible, and if you can get a bounce shot off the wall, even better to double up that damage. The slowing is also quite nice, but if you're looking to slow the enemy, just use Ice Sheet as it's cheaper and has a longer range and is more effective and is a better slow. Also be careful where you aim this, as the damage has no allegiance, and if you aim it towards your own units, it will hit them just as easily as the enemies. The Overcast costs 10 winds of magic and doubles the damage, but is still not all armor piercing. Honestly, you really don't want to use this any different to the base spell. The damage is still 0 armor piercing, so you're still going to focus on less armor targets to make the most of it. Find the biggest clump you can, don't aim at your own troops, and you should be golden. Next up we have Frostblades. This is an augment spell, costs 7 winds of magic and has a 43-second cooldown. It can only be targeted in a single friendly unit and has a 200 meter cast range. The targeted unit is granted magical attacks, alongside 25% base weapon and armor piercing weapon damage, and 24 melee attack for 26 seconds. You want to use this on the strongest damage dealers on your front lines, since those percentage base buffs will only be more powerful on higher damage units. Alongside this, the melee attack buff will ensure they're hitting a lot more often, resulting in crazy high damage output, and the magical attacks will ensure no resistances get in the way of that. This all adds up to making a single unit into a powerhouse of damage output. Just target something high tier and send it off to the races. Just make sure 2 things. 1, they can survive to make full use of this boosted damage, and 2, whatever they're going against is something that's not going to die in the first 5 seconds, otherwise you're not really getting value out of the other 20 seconds of spell time. The Overcast costs 10 winds of magic and now grants a 50% bonus to base weapon and armor piercing weapon damage. And again, the same advice applies as before. Use this on your highest damage front lines units and watch their stats and damage output skyrocket. If you're using this, then be extra sure they aren't going to melt whatever they're fighting too quickly, as with stats like these, you want them fighting the entire time. Next up we have Death Frost. This is a direct damage spell, costs 14 winds of magic and has a 38-second cooldown. It can only be targeted on a single enemy unit and has a cast range of 100 meters. It causes direct damage between 34 and 67 damage per second to the target HP pool for 20 seconds, and is of course most powerful versus single entities. Of course you want to focus this on single entity units like lords and heroes as well as giant monsters. The damage isn't the highest in the world, but it is directly to the HP pool, meaning no manner of armor or resistances can stop it, so it can be a great way to chip through extremely tanky enemies. I would say use it at the same time as focusing down the target to overwhelm them with a lot of damage at once and take out a bigger chunk for their HP and leadership to push them to retreat as soon as possible. Also avoid casting it on something that either has regeneration or can get away, as the ticking damage will just disappear and not be enough to take out most targets without help. The Overcast costs 17 winds of magic and has a 300 meters cast range. Of course you want to use this exactly the same as the base spell, apart from now you can cast it from much further away. This allows you to keep your casters safe and deal damage to the targets that might be on the opposite side of the map. Of course, only use this when you aren't in range to use the base cast, as otherwise you're basically wasting winds of magic for no reason. Next up we have Crystal Sanctuary. This is an augment spell, costs 14 winds of magic and has a 35-second cooldown. It can all be targeted on a single friendly unit and has a 200 meter cast range. The targeted unit is granted 60% damage resistance but cannot move for the 35-second duration. This one is amazing for using on your front lines that aren't going to be moving anyway. It will make them unbelievably tanky with that flat 60% damage reduction, meaning the enemy will need to do over twice the normal damage to them for them to feel a single thing. This is of course best used in a tanky front line to allow them to absorb a ton of enemy hits, whilst other units do the real damage for them. You can also use it on high damage units to allow them to deal damage with less risk to themselves, and combining this with the Frostblades will give you a unit that is nearly impossible to take out, whilst doing an insane amount of damage. Of course, you can just cast this on any old unit that's taken a lot of damage, just make sure they aren't going to get screwed over by the movement being disabled, as a stationary target can easily be taking over double the damage of a moving one. The overcast costs 26 winds of magic and now affects units in a 25 meter area of effect. The area of effect means you can make a ton of your units incredibly tanky, so this makes it even better on the front lines as you can get multiple troops in the area and have them become unkillable for a short time. Of course, the same advice applies with regards to getting them some help with the damage and ensuring they'll be okay if they don't move. If you bear all this in mind, the enemy shouldn't be able to touch you. And our final spell is Heart of Winter. This is a direct damage spell and costs 24 winds of magic and has a 54-second cooldown. It can all be targeted on the ground and has a 30 meter area of effect and a 100 meter cast range. Now this spell has 4 phases and each one lasts 8 seconds. Phase 1 does 25 to 50 damage per second, Phase 2 does 50 to 100 damage per second and reduces speed by 25%, Phase 3 does 75 to 150 damage per second and minus 40% speed, and Phase 4 does 100 to 200 damage per second and minus 60% speed. And this is every single unit in that area. Now this is one of the most damaging spells to ever hit the game, but there are 2 key issues with it that prevent it from being overpowered. It's a stationary area and it deals damage over time. This means if the enemy simply walk out of the area, the damage is wasted, and you are a lot of magic out of pocket for a little gain. You want to use this on enemies that you are sure aren't going to move out of the area. Great targets are the enemy front lines that are bogged down by your troops, as well as anything that is in a very busy area that has no place to move. Of course, the longer the spell goes, the more damage and the more intense the slow, so enemies will be taking more hits and find it a lot harder to get out towards the end, meaning the longer you can keep them there, the better the effects. If you can hit something for the full duration, it's going to take some serious hits. The damage is excellent versus pretty much everything, so clumps of front lines, monsters, or whatever else you can hit will do nicely. And finally, the Overcasts cost a whopping 28 winds of magic and increases the damage of all phases by 50%. Now this is a spell for when you really want to clear an area of enemies. The damage this spell can do is astronomically high, but quite like the base spell, you need to make sure that enemies stay in it for the full effect. If they do, then there is hardly anything that can withstand the insane beating of up to 6,000 damage. Plop it down on the largest group of high HP and high value enemies you can, and watch them melt, or I suppose freeze, before your eyes. If you keep him still, you can't go wrong. And that concludes this guide on the lore of ice magic. Let me know what you think of the lore in the comments below, let me know what you thought of this video by leaving a like or a dislike, and if you want to see more content like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. I'd like to take this time to thank all supporters of the channel, like Dominic Schmass, Adam T, and of course Henry Tucker for their support at the Unclean Ones tier. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do it here on YouTube, over on Twitch, or on Patreon, and get shoutouts at the end of videos just like all these wonderful people. Huge thanks to all supporters, one final thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.